Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our Going Global webinar. So it's great to see that you're all interested in finding out how investing in translations can really drive international growth. So to start off, we'd just like to do some introductions. Just to introduce myself. I am Director of Comtec Translations. I've been working in the translation industry for over 15 years now, managing Comtec in its development and growth. In that time, I've worked with clients across a whole range of different sectors, of all different sizes and all different stages of international growth, from first-time exporters to fully established international brands. And I've come across, and we've come across as a business, there's so many different challenges that companies face at different stages of their international growth. So we're very much looking forward to sharing our experiences to help you be as well prepared as you can for dealing with those challenges. So I'd just like to hand over to Emily.
Hi there, so I'm Emily and I'm an account manager here at Comtec. I've been part of the Comtec team for about 2.5 years now, and I support many global organisations with their translation requirements in order to help them meet their international objectives. So just before we get started, a little bit of information about how the webinar is going to work today. If you've got any questions at any point, then please feel free to put them in the chat. Just make sure that it's showing us all panellists and attendees so that everybody can see your questions and comments. If at any point you would like to share your experience or have a bit of a chat with us, then just raise your hand and we can take you off mute. It's a nice intimate group today, so we're happy to kind of have a little bit more interactivity and a chance for people to share their experience if they'd like to. We'll have a couple of polls throughout the webinar for you to get involved, and there will be a Q&A section at the end of the webinar just for you to ask any questions that perhaps we didn't address today. So let's kick off then with our first poll. We would be interested in knowing how you currently handle your translations. So you should see a poll pop up on the screen very shortly with all the different options for you. So do you outsource your translations to an agency? Are you completing the translations in-house? Or are you currently looking into translation as an option down the road for your business? So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to answer the poll. We'd be really interested to see what you're currently doing with your translations. So we've got 5 answers so far. Anybody else like to share? Okay, so thank you to the 9 people who have voted in the poll. I'm going to end it now and you'll see the results pop up on the screen. So as you can see, the vast majority of people are already outsourcing their translations to a partner. There's also some people looking into translation as an option down the road. And I can see that somebody has popped up in the chat. Thank you, Rachel. So you currently do a mix of outsourcing and internal. So it'd be great to hear a little bit later on about how that's working for you and what you think, which process works best. So moving on.
Right, moving on. So just to go through what we'd like to cover with you in our session today. So we're going to kick off with a very short introduction to Comtec. I'd then like to look at the case for investing in translation. So why is it worthwhile making that proper investment? And we'll look at some interesting research to back that up. We'll then look at what you might want to be translating, what you might want to consider translating depending on where you are in terms of international growth. I'm then going to hand over to Emily, who will very much focus on the practical side of managing translations. She'll look at the key building blocks to developing an effective approach to managing translations, share some top tips to supercharge your translation strategy, and then finally look at very importantly, how to measure your return on investment in translations. So just a brief introduction to Comtec. So we were founded in 1981, so we're fast approaching our 40-year mark. We offer the full range of translation and localization services, and also interpreting services as well. In terms of languages, we cover over 200 languages, but in terms of regular requirements, that's probably a core of about 50 core languages. We're able to deliver that number of languages and also cover a huge range of specialist fields through our network of freelance linguists who all specialize, they're all mother tongue, only translate into their mother tongue and specialize in a particular field. We have both ISO 9001 and 17100 certification. And we are, I mean, one of the key things for us is a fanatical focus on quality. So we very much appreciate that our clients are trusting us to deliver the best possible service and the highest standards of quality. So quality for us is a key building block for our service. So we support clients at all stages of international growth, as I mentioned earlier, across a whole range of sectors. And we also support both the end client and creative agencies, content houses supporting those clients as well. So moving on to why invest in translations. Well, sticking to English is just not enough, and there's a wealth of research to back this up. Research from the Chambers of Commerce showed that 61% of businesses cited language skills as a real barrier for their expansion. So this is a key factor that's holding them back. It's also worth considering that, in fact, only 6% of the world's population speaks English as their first language. So 94% of the world's population speaks another language other than English as their first language. And when we look closer to home, only 39% of the French population speak English fluently, 35% of the Italians, and 23% of Spaniards. So, and these are some of our kind of nearest neighbours that we would like to do business with. But when we look further afield, there are even fewer people are speaking English fluently. So, for example, only 5% of Russians and less than 1% of Chinese. So by not investing properly in translations, we're really running the risk of alienating some of our potential customers. Now, there's a very good quote that some of you may have, I'm sure, would have come across before, but I think it really sums up where we are with translations. And from Nelson Mandela: if you talk to a man in the language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. I think that is very, very significant. And by communicating with customers in their own language, you can really build your brand and really engage your target audience. And we know that customer relationships are key to the growth of our brands. And our customers become our advocates. And to really engage with them, we need to be speaking to them in their own language and delivering a fully localized experience. But what do we mean by a fully localized experience? So localization takes it one step further than translation, where we're really understanding the cultural context and making those adaptations. And that's what we mean by delivering a fully localized experience. But if we look at some of the research around behaviors online around translation, this really brings the point home even more. So when customers come to a website in their own language, there's research that's shown that they will pay more for a product. They'll be 4 times more likely to purchase from a website, and they'll stay twice as long on that website. So those are really significant pieces of research from the Forrester Research and the Common Sense Advisory, which really shows that effective localization is the key to engaging your international audience. So let's look at what are the top 10 languages on the internet. So after English, not surprisingly, we've got Chinese and Spanish, as these are the most widely spoken languages in the world. Chinese is in fact the fastest growing language in the world, with 1.3 billion native speakers, followed by Spanish at 460 million. So the point here is that people are searching and using the internet in languages, and a lot of languages other than English. And if we really want to engage with those people to buy our products and engage with our brands, localization is key. So what to translate, where to invest in translations. This very much depends on where your organization is in the international growth journey. In the early stages, marketing content will be a priority to perhaps support exhibiting at trade shows overseas, or just to sort of engaging customers initially online. So you'd be looking at website content, sales brochures, case studies, and so on. But then as a company grows and it's building its international workforce, there will then be a need to localize training materials, localize international communications such as newsletters and town hall presentations. And there's also a wealth of research which shows how important it is to invest in localization of training materials as well for your employees, to make sure they really engage with the content. And we've spoken previously on that, and we can share some information about that after the webinar. But there's a wealth of evidence to show how important delivering training in your audience's own language is key. But as the company grows, the requirements will change, both in terms of language and scope, but also the approach to managing translation. So looking at some of our clients and how we've supported them through their international growth, we've seen that early on, translation requirements may be more ad hoc, some handled centrally, some handled by the markets. But as the company grows, there's a real need to build a proper global brand and ensure that there's a consistent messaging around that brand, a consistent style and tone of voice. But at the same time, keeping the local input and making sure that the materials are fully localized to the requirements of the particular local culture. And a lot of our clients have seen that by centralizing the translations, that's really helped that process. Centralizing it helps to establish that global brand. It helps to manage the costs. It helps to ensure consistency in the messaging and the translation quality across all the different channels. It also helps with the rollout, for example, the launch of a new product, a new service, or a rollout of a new training program, for example, across multiple markets for employees. But the challenge is always how to manage it centrally without losing that key local input. So I'm now going to hand over to Emily, who's going to talk through with you some of the building blocks to establishing that approach, to look at how do you manage centrally your translations, but ensuring that the content is fully localized so we really engage with the target audience.
Okay, thank you very much, Sophie. So before we advise on best practice, we'd like to hear a little bit more from you. So what have your challenges been regarding translation? So you'll see another poll pop up on your screen very shortly. And some of the challenges that you might be facing are quality, slow turnaround times, lack of knowledge around translation, file formats, or maybe there's something else. So if maybe you are new to translation or you are managing things in-house, then we'd just like to hear a little bit really about what are kind of the stumbling blocks really when it comes to translation. So we'll just give you a little bit of time to have a look at that. So far we can see that maybe a lack of knowledge around translation has been a problem. File formats also coming up, slow turnaround times, and maybe a couple of other additional things that we haven't really thought about. So for the people that have answered anything else, it might be quite nice for us to take a pause here and see if anybody wants to share their experience. So I'm just going to end the poll and bring up the results on the screen. If anybody wants to share a little bit about the challenges that they've experienced with translation, just raise your hand and we can take you off mute. Okay, so Faye here has said that your external translations are often challenged by your internal colleagues. Actually, market review is something that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and your internal subject matter experts can be a huge advocate for the translation process. It's just about working with your translation partner to make sure that you're kind of making the most of everybody's time and their expertise, to make sure that the process is as streamlined as possible. So we'll definitely be talking about that in a little bit. Anybody else want to share a bit about the challenges they've come across? So Ruth has said the same thing. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You know, market reviewers can sometimes actually slow down a project because translation isn't their main priority. They've obviously got competing responsibilities that take up their time. So yeah, that's definitely something that we'll talk about in the next section. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for sharing your input there. I'm just going to close the poll and now I'll move on. Okay, so the first thing to say is obviously there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to putting in place a translation strategy. Translation strategy will obviously depend on the stage of international growth that your organisation is at. So for example, a company that's starting to test the waters overseas, expanding into a small number of markets, will think very differently from a company that has already got a significant presence internationally, and they've grown in multiple markets, and they might be thinking about centralising some of their core functions, of which translation will obviously be part of that. Whatever stage you're at, there are 3 core things to bear in mind. So first of all, you want to be identifying the key markets and the key languages, whether that's you're just starting out and you haven't really thought about which of those you'd like to prioritise, or maybe you're a little bit further down and you've now got a clearer idea of what your priorities should be in terms of regions and languages. It's also important to prioritise content for business objectives and also according to the cultural preferences of your organisation. Secondly, you want to be taking the time to find the right fit when it comes to a translation partner. So you want to make sure that your translation partner has worked with organisations at your particular stage of growth, make sure that they've got relevant sector experience and also experience of delivering marketing translations, because you want to make sure that they've got that experience to be able to deliver quality translations for that particular purpose. You want to ensure that they are going to be delivering quality translations, so look out for things like the ISO certification and any details that they can provide you with the quality processes that they follow in-house. And also you want to make sure that they're going to be able to fit in with your processes. So translation shouldn't be a burden, it shouldn't be a hassle, it should be a very seamless extension to your existing processes. So you want to make sure that your translation partner has the flexibility to slot in and make life as easy as possible when it comes to translating your content. Finally, market review, and as this has already come up in the poll, so it's great to kind of be talking about it already. It depends again on the stage of growth that you're at. So early stages of growth, you might find that markets are more autonomous. They might be handling translations themselves. We recommend that you establish a localization champion in each of your markets. So that's somebody who is working with your translation partner around things like a glossary, style guide, and also handling the market review process to make things as streamlined as possible. Also making sure that you're using the same reviewer in each market for each project allows a greater level of consistency, and it also makes sure that once one round of feedback has been given, that has been obviously shared with the linguist, shared with the translation team, and it can be borne in mind for the next project. So it just allows that greater understanding and that greater collaboration between your translation team and your market reviewers. Secondly, if you're already established overseas, you might have native speaking colleagues and you're thinking, I've already got linguists within my organisation, why should I be thinking about outsourcing my translation requirements? Well, there's 3 things here to kind of bear in mind and might actually help you answer that question. First of all, quality. So your translation partner will have native speakers. They will do the translation for you. It might be that you've got people in your organisation who might speak that language, they might be familiar with that language, but it can't replace a native speaking competency. Secondly, there'll be subject matter experts. They'll have relevant experience in translating specifically in that subject area. There might also be quality procedures and in-house QA procedures that are put in place, which is not that don't get carried out when you're completing translations in-house. And also your translation partner will be able to offer additional services such as proofreading and monolingual review, or that will help enhance the quality of your translations. Secondly, speed, as we've already talked about. Translations done by a translation partner, that is their only job. There are no competing priorities. There is nothing else for them to fit in around that project. That is their sole purpose. So that means then that all languages can be rolled out simultaneously. You're working with your translation partner to ensure that there are no project delays. And that allows then for you to have a fully localized program or website or brochure, and each language is delivered at the same time. Finally, file formats, and this has already come up as one of the challenges that people are experiencing. Things like websites, brochures, learning content can often be exported in a tricky format. So you might be looking at things like XLIFs, IDMLs, JSONs, and if you're not directly handling those files and just passing them between stakeholders, if you can't open them on your computer, then odds are the people that you're asking to complete the translations can't open them either. So that's where it really comes in handy to partner with a translation partner, because they can handle these file formats and they can also translate into them. So that's just another reason why having a strategic translation partner in place can make your life a lot easier. So now we're going to move on to how to supercharge your translation strategy. And there's lots of different aspects to this. So first of all, you can be looking at collating existing translations and gathering feedback. So it's really important to understand if there have been any previous issues with translations, where these have come from. So it could be that they are particular preferences within your market that perhaps haven't been captured. So it's a good idea to have a dialogue between your translation partner and your market reviewers, just to make sure that you fully understood the requirements of your markets. You might also need to look at existing translations that have been approved and understand what has been good about those and what is it that you'd like to replicate in those for future translation projects. You also want to be looking at gathering reference material. So this could be approved translations, like I've said, it could be glossaries, it could be style guides, it could be tone of voice documents. If you've got a particular way that one market likes to talk about their processes or their products, then it's really great to share that with your translation partner, so that they've got that innate understanding of how your company works and how they communicate in each language and each market. Then you want to make sure that you're centralizing your translation strategy by working with other departments to ensure consistency. So that means sharing glossaries, it means establishing one key reviewer, and also sharing translation memories to make sure that all of your company departments are using the same process, they're using the same terminology, they're adhering to the same style, and that will allow for greater consistency across all aspects of your translations, be it marketing, content on the website, training documentation, and that all will make sure that your translations as a whole are more coherent. Then you want to be looking at asking your translation partner to support the project management of the market review process. So your translation partner could quite often liaise directly with your market reviewers. This will take the stress away from you handling the translation process. So that means that you're not having to handle multiple files. It means that you're not having to chase deadlines. And it also means that you can see a greater return on investment because you're being given more time to focus on your actual day-to-day work outside of translation. And finally, looking at things like cultural awareness. So this can very much depend on the stage that you're at. If you're in the early stages of growing internationally, then there's some really useful information on basic cultural awareness that you can find on the Department of International Trade. However, if you're growing overseas already, you may find that your sales team need a deeper understanding of how to communicate differently with different cultures. So that could be using different formality levels, whether to address somebody as sir or madam or Mr. and Mrs. or using their first name, because that can often differ between different cultures. It could be how you address members of different genders, because that can also depending on what culture you're interacting with. How to make small talk. Obviously, the British people like to talk about the weather, but it could be that other European countries or Asian or African communities handle small talk slightly differently. And even things about taking notes during meetings. In some cultures, that could be considered rude if you're not making constant eye contact. If you're looking down and making notes, it can be seen that you're not giving your full attention. So it's really good to have that basic understanding of how to do business with people in other cultures. And finally, if you're established enough to have offices overseas, then you'll need to help your colleagues talk to each other. And that can lead to things like how to handle HR issues, how to handle internal communications. And you want to make sure that you've got an understanding of how to communicate those messages in different cultures. And finally, how to measure return on investment. So this is a key question that we see time and time again, and it's definitely something important to bear in mind. So if you are at the start of your international growth journey, you might be thinking about translating your website if you haven't already. And that's where you can see clear return on investment. So you might have new product orders from the German version of your website, for example. You might have higher number of visitors to your website because it's now available in more languages and more people are able to access it. You could see a number of inquiries has increased following the translation of your website, and which in turn can lead to more customers and new leads. Another interesting way to look at return on investment is the gift of time. So teaming up with a translation partner will give you back the time that has previously been spent handling the translation process yourself. So that could be liaising with market reviewers, it could be setting up the files that need to be translated, it could be collating reference material, could be spent chasing deadlines for your market reviewers, for example. Handing all of that over to your translation partner will give you so much more time to focus on the things that you need to be focusing on outside of translation. So for example, one of the clients that we have partnered with is an L&D company, and partnering with us and giving us the whole process from start to finish allows them to focus on creating new content and winning new clients, and that just has given them so much more opportunity to focus on what they actually should be doing on a day-to-day basis rather than spending time being taken up with the translation process. So in summary, there's a couple of things here that have just summarised some of the key points that we've shared during the webinar today. So as we've said, your translation strategy will depend on the stage of growth that you're at. So that could be the kind of content you're looking to translate, it could be the departments that you're looking to involve, and it could also depend on the number of languages and the scope of content that you're translating. Outsourcing to a translation partner can lead to better quality, it can lead to faster turnaround times, and it can obviously lead to less project management time for you. Sharing reference material and using translation memory software will ensure greater consistency, not only across your own department and the different content that you are translating, but also across different departments throughout your organisation and the different regions as well. And finally, the market review process makes the most of your international colleagues' expertise while minimising the time that they have to invest in the translation process. So they're no longer spending days on end doing the translations themselves. They're just having that final sign off of the translations to make sure that everything is in line with your company's terminology and style and preferences. And that's a much shorter task than them having to do the translations themselves. So we hope that you found that webinar useful. We hope that we've touched on some of your burning questions, but we'd just like to pause here and see if anybody's got anything else that they'd like to share, any questions that they'd like to ask, and we can launch a Q&A section as well so that you can have plenty of opportunity to get involved. So we really like to hear from you. And don't forget, if you'd like to be taken off mute, then just raise your hand and we can do that for you. Okay, Ruth, you've raised your hand, so I'm just going to take you off mute and you should be able to talk now.
Can you hear me now?
Hi, Ruth, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to ask a quick question about, obviously one of the things that holds us up sometimes is our local representatives who take some time to check the documents through. It would be interesting to have reports back sometimes to know how much of the text they're actually changing, so that, you know, to work towards a point where actually we can use those local reps less and less.
Yes.
If the translations are not really requiring many amends.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I mean, obviously you want to be working to the point where your local market reviewers are just having that final sign off and spending as little time as possible, or even, like you said, not involving them at all. So I think that's definitely something that we could be looking at in terms of not only the amount of changes that they're making, but the kind of changes they're making as well.
Yes.
So our market review guidelines are obviously focused on changes that are specific to your company terminology and preferred style and things like that, but you might find that your market reviewers are making preferential changes, which is obviously not the best use of their time. So I think that's definitely something to look into, and certainly something that we can help you do. And yeah, I think it could be a really useful exercise for other companies to bear in mind as well when you're looking at the kind of changes that your market reviewers are making, just making sure that they are actually making useful changes and not spending their time
rewriting
things
yes.
Exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and my other question, I mean, it's very specific to our company. Obviously we're already using you in several areas of our business, but do you make those connections with our terminology and with our language across the documents that you're receiving, or is this something that we need to sort of point out every time we put in a job with you?
So we use translation memory software. So every time that we complete a job for our clients, it is stored to their specific translation memory. So we have one for you in each language. And that means then that every time we do receive a document from you, it's run against the translation memory to obviously make sure if there's any matches there in terms of terminology. I believe we also have a glossary and a term base, which helps our translators do this as well. So it's something that's kind of factored into our standard process when it comes to translation. And it means then that we also have a established translation team for most of our clients who are familiar with the subject matter, with the kind of content that we translate on a regular basis, and they've also built up that innate understanding of each of our clients to make sure that they are sort of fully up to speed and are most familiar with your translations.
Great.
So that's definitely something that we kind of pride ourselves on, is having that bespoke translation team. And it also, minimizes the amount of time that we have to spend briefing on our linguists at the start of every project, because, after, how long that we've been working with you, for example, our translators know the content as well as we do, really.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. So if you've got a request from a new part of the business, a new department or something, you would all automatically click into the to the library bank that you're currently using.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it'd also be worth obviously understanding any particular preferences of a new department. So maybe they have a particular style that is different to other departments that we've worked with previously, or there's something else that's specific to them that they'd like us to bear in mind. But absolutely, it's very easy to kind of connect that to your existing translation memory.
I think part of the process as well is to make sure that that's constantly updated and expanded, that library, and that's part of the process that we like to include on an ongoing basis, so it's constantly updated, refreshed and added to as we do more. But yes, as Emily said, if we were to work with a new department, it's to make sure that we're taking on board any terminology and so on that's particular to that department.
Yes, lovely. Thank you. That answers my question.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much, Ruth. So, Rachel would also like to speak, so I'm just going to allow you to speak, Rachel.
There we go.
Hi there, go ahead.
Hi, just a quick question regarding feedback.
Yes.
We've got a very good relationship with Comtec already, and we're finding that it takes quite a while to get our peer reviewers to give us a response. And when we do get a response, we feed that back to Comtec, and we work out, the changes that have been made stylistically and also linguistically. Have you got any tips for how to motivate people to give us their feedback? Because we're finding that people need something urgently, and then we sort of say, it'd be great if you could just let us know the changes or the final version, and we don't hear anything further.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a common challenge, and over the years what we try to do really is to try and make that process as easy for you as we possibly can in terms of the tools. So we have the online review tools and so on, but we understand there's a stage before then about getting sort of buy-in and involvement from them into the process. I mean, we've done work previously with clients where we would organise a kind of, organise an introduction, like a webinar where we bring those people together, or just to help to make the case for why we need their input and how much value it gives to the process, but also making sure that we are making the best possible use of their time, because we very much understand a lot of the time, as Emily said, and as you said, Rachel, it's difficult to get them to commit, and they've got other things, got other priorities.
Exactly.
It's just making them feel valued and making them, so they can see how important it is, but also making it easy for them to do it.
Yeah. And I think, as Sophie mentioned, the online review platform is actually a key part of that. And it can also, we found that it certainly helps not only making reviewers' lives a lot easier, but also we're looking into ways that you can put like a reminder email through that. So maybe 24, 48 hours before their deadline to provide their feedback is coming up, it actually sends a prompt to them, so that you don't have to kind of be the one to chase that up yourself. So it kind of, we found that has also helped deliver feedback in a more timely manner. It's something that we're kind of still investigating on this side, but we're hoping to sort of roll out in the next couple of months. And it certainly kind of takes the awkwardness away, I suppose, of you having to personally follow up with each individual, and also for you having to remember sort of 24, 48 hours ahead of time as well. So that's hopefully something that we can to share very soon to make your life a little bit easier around that.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to share just before we wrap up for today? No? Okay, well, if you do have any questions come up after leaving the webinar today, then our contact details are on the screen for you now. We've also given you our website and our telephone number, so do give us a call if you've got any burning questions or anything that we can help you with when it comes to translating your content.
Yeah, we'll be sending out a recording of the webinar, and we're also shortly launching a guide to how to kickstart your translation strategy, and that should be released in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be sharing that with you all as well, and you'll be able to find that on our website, and also there'll be links on LinkedIn and other areas. So we look forward to sharing that with you as well.
Yeah, so thank you very much for your time today and for joining our webinar. It was lovely to hear from those of you who shared your experiences, and hopefully that we'll hear from you again very soon. Thank you very much and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.